Hello, everyone. Welcome to Beacon Pointe's Foundations of Finance course. Today is our final class of the series. We will be learning all about financial planning steps to set yourself up for financial success in today's Personal Finance 101, The Road to Success. My name is Sydney Alicano. I am a marketing associate for Beacon Pointe and have the pleasure of introducing to you our professors for today's class. Callie and Kate have been with Beacon Pointe for many years, representing both coasts, Kate in Philadelphia and Callie in San Diego. As certified financial planners and active members of our Women's Advisory Institute, Kate and Callie are both dedicated to guiding women and multi-generational families through every financial stage of life. Their work helps empower clients today and inspire the investors of tomorrow. Thank you both for all that you do. Before we get started, a quick note. If you have any questions during the pre-recorded session, feel free to email us at info@beaconpointe.com with the subject line of Foundations of Finance, Class 5 questions, and we'll follow up with answers. That wraps up our class prep. Kate and Callie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sydney. Where we wanted to start was just by going through our agenda with you today. What we want to focus on in this class is going through some of the top, what we call needle movers, which is what we have found to be the most effective in building the right financial foundations for our clients. And you don't have to be perfect, but we have found that when you start with these basic steps, it can just make such a huge difference with your financial life. That in mind, the areas that we're going through today are knowing where you stand today with your finances. We'll review saving seasons. We're going to go through our handy savings cheat sheet. We're going to go through protecting yourself and your loved ones, and then putting all of that into practice. Regardless of where you are with your financial journey, really the most important place to start is knowing what your personal financial coordinates are today. This is the first area we recommend starting with, is really knowing what those coordinates are, starting with your net worth and your cash flow. First, we will help you calculate your net worth. This tends to be relatively straightforward for most people to put together. What you'll want to do is put together a list of what is the value of all of your current assets. So that will include all of the accounts that you have, savings accounts, retirement accounts, etc. It will include any properties that you might own, any businesses. Then what you'll want to do is put together the list of any of your liabilities. And what that includes is going to be anything that you owe. So that might be student loans, car loans, a mortgage. Then you'll take the value of the assets and subtract out the value of the liabilities. That will give you your total net worth. And as you start out, we always like to note that it's common to start off with a relatively low or even a negative number. But really over time, our goal for you is to continue to build up your net worth towards, whatever your goals may be. Once you know your net worth, this exercise will actually show us whether you're going to be moving forward or backwards based on your monthly cash flow. When calculating your cash flow, what you're going to want to do is start with tallying up all of your income from all sources. That will include any salary, bonuses, any investment income that you might have, any rental income. So really any income that you have, you'll want to include. And what you'll want to focus on here for this exercise is the net income after taxes. Then what you'll want to do is calculate your expenses. And this is usually a little bit more of a time-intensive process for a lot of our clients, but truthfully, we think this is the most important data piece that really helps our clients feel knowledgeable and in control because you know what's going out every month. So how to calculate this? This is our recommendation is to really start by doing your 30-minute best estimate is what we call it. So you sit down, grab a cup of coffee, put your timer on for 30 minutes, and really what you'll want to do is just come up with your best estimate. I think what we often see is a lot of clients will let perfection be the enemy of good with this exercise. So we like to do it this way so that at least you get a general idea. We find that using a spreadsheet like this can be really helpful, which breaks out the expenses into different categories and also breaks out into what is reoccurring versus what are more one-time expenses. And in order to actually figure out what you're spending, you can often go back and look at, if you have a checkbook, look at that. You can look at your statements for any of your accounts or credit cards. What I have found to be really handy is a lot of credit cards actually put together an annual summary of what you spend. So that can also be a fantastic way to come up with this estimate. And once you get this initial estimate, you can always make adjustments at any time after you get a feel for what's actually going out. Once you get that number, you will take your income that we calculated, you'll subtract out those expenses, and that will give us your monthly cash flow. And this is a really interesting process because it'll show you if you're running a deficit on a monthly basis. So if you're dipping into your savings, or if you're running a surplus that can go into adding to your savings. So this will help you figure out if your cash flow is, going up or going down and is moving you along in your journey. And if you happen to be running a deficit, we really think that knowledge is power here. So once you find out this information, it can be a really good motivator to develop a solution to help get you moving in the right direction. And then, oftentimes even we find that clients who are running a surplus can actually be worrying a little bit too much about this. So I think sometimes it can be really nice for you to go through this exercise and say, hey, I am running a surplus. I'm actually in a good financial position, and it can give a little bit of comfort. So maybe people don't have to worry quite as much if they are moving in a positive direction. So either way, it's a really helpful exercise to go through.
Thank you so much, Callie. That's all really helpful. I'm going to take us up to the big picture for a minute. So now that you know where you are, let's think about where you want to go. As a financial advisor, reviewing goals is the very first thing that Callie and I go through with our clients. We bring it up at each meeting because taking the time to think about your goals and learning how to best prioritize them is the first step towards actually accomplishing them. So think about a short-term goal. Maybe some of the ones on the screen here apply. Whatever that goal is, take time to think about it and write it down. All right, and Callie said we're going to talk through some needle movers and try to get excited about where your money can take you. So these are what we call push goals. Goals that spark motivation and give your financial plan some real purpose. It's hard. We know it's hard to stay consistent unless there's something that genuinely excites you and feels possible. I had a client, and I've told Callie this many times, who dreaded budgeting. She could not manage Callie's 30-minute exercise. But when we connected that budgeting to her dream of traveling to all 7 continents and retiring early, things started to shift, and suddenly the numbers started to have meaning. The process became less of a chore and more just a path to financial freedom. So I'd call that a long-term push goal, but we can even zoom in on a short-term goal, something that excites you. Maybe that's a nice gym membership or hiring someone to organize your closet so you can start the day feeling calm and in control. The point is, when you get clear on what you really want, even saving money becomes more energizing. And without that clarity, saving just feels like this vague, nagging pressure. You need to save more and you don't have a clear direction. So get clear, be as specific as possible, and get excited. So now that we have our cash flow in sight, we're feeling motivated, we've got a little momentum, this is where things start to move. Being intentional with where your money goes makes all the difference. And while everyone's financial picture is unique, there's one rule of thumb that we often recommend, which is saving about 20% of your income each month. So you go through Callie's exercise. If our cash flow at the end of the month, ideally, we've saved 20% of that. And here's the key. I want you to automate this. Automate your 401k contributions. Automate transfers to your brokerage account. Automate your debt payments, student loan payments, car payments, credit cards. When you set it up like this, you make savings a non-negotiable. You start the month with maybe 80% of your total paycheck. And more often than not, what we see is people figure out how to live on that 80%. And that way you can spend on your wants and your needs without feeling any type of guilt. And we think that that's pretty powerful. We completely understand getting to that 20% savings mark isn't easy. It usually means you're making trade-offs now in exchange for something better down the line. And I want it to be something that genuinely excites you and feels possible. So your needs bucket here is often the hardest to reduce. There are always opportunities. I don't want you to think of this about deprivation, but really about choice. I want you to feel in control. Callie's going to walk us through needs versus wants on a couple of slides. So think about, where you're spending in each of those categories. And if you really want to supercharge your savings, you're feeling extra motivated, you can look to manage both your needs and your wants here.
So, as Kate mentioned, what is a need versus a want? Really, when it comes down to it, a need is going to be, what do you actually need on a day-to-day basis? That can actually differ person to person, but for most people, that would include things like housing, utilities, basic food, transportation, really, again, anything that you need on a day-to-day. Wants are going to be more of the fun stuff. So again, that differs person by person, but it's going to be something like vacations, some aspects of dining out, maybe concerts. So this category, as Kate mentioned, is going to be the first place that we'd recommend starting if you do want to try to cut back on some of your expenses to reach some of the goals that she mentioned. And in order to actually figure out, what your financial coordinates are, these are some really fantastic resources. First and foremost, we have our Beacon Pointe expense worksheet. That is what you saw on that first page that we were looking at the cash flow broken out into the different categories. If it would be helpful, we'd be happy to send that along to you if you wanted to reach out after the session. There are also a lot of different resources available online and different softwares that you could use that do something similar. For example, Credit Karma is a very popular budgeting website. And the cool thing is that if you connect through your credit cards, it will actually automatically categorize them. So that can be a really helpful tool. You could also connect through, any of your investment accounts, and that'll show you your net worth as well. Very similarly, softwares like Quicken and QuickBooks, they also track income and expenses, and they'll also automatically categorize. So any of these tools are going to be really helpful ways for you to identify those coordinates and figure out what you're spending in each category. And then to Kate's point, if you do want to make any cuts, this is going to be a really good process for you to go through to figure out where to trim back.
Thanks, Callie. We're going to go through next what we call the savings season. So I'm going to start with the first savings season when you're just starting out. So maybe you're in a first job, paying off student loans. It can feel like there's barely any room to save. And yet this is actually one of the best and most important times to start building that habit. At this stage, our expenses are often a little more flexible, right? And even small amounts saved can build incredible momentum over time. Life gets more expensive. Down the line, you might face things like home maintenance, saving for your kids' college education, maybe even supporting aging parents. So even if it's just a little, getting into the rhythm of savings early helps to set the tone. And it's less about the amount right now and more about building that muscle. The earlier you start, the earlier it becomes to handle what's ahead, and the more freedom you'll have to make choices that you're excited about later. All right. This is one of my favorite charts because it shows the real power of compound interest. I want to take you through two examples here. So first we have investor one. She starts saving at age 25. She puts away $5,000 a year, and then she stops saving entirely. And then we have investor two, who doesn't start until 35, so 10 years later, saves $5,000 of the same amount, saves every single year for the next 30 years. So who ends up with more money here? It's investor one. And that's the magic of compound interest. When you give your money time to grow, it starts doing the heavy lifting for you. So even though investor one saved for a shorter amount of time, they put in far less money overall. Starting earlier made all the difference. And so that's why we talk about it so much, starting as early as possible, even if it's a small amount. Compound interest needs time, not perfection. You'll hear it over and over again. We just want you to get started. And the earlier you begin, the more that you can let your money work while you sleep. And if we take it one step further to our supercharged example, this is those same two investors, but investor one continued to save that $5,000 per month until age 65. You can see the power, the difference that 10 years of starting early makes. And that's the power of compounding interest. All right. I'm going to talk a little bit here now about credit and student loans before turning it back to Callie. So when you're just starting out, one of the smartest things you can do is check in on your credit. And that means both your credit report and your credit score. You can pull your credit report for free at annualcreditreport.com. This is the official government mandated site. I'd like you to check that report for accuracy. Make sure you recognize all of the items on it. And then your credit score is basically your financial reputation in a number. The two biggest things that impact your credit score are, do you pay your bills on time? And how much of your available credit are you using? That's called your credit utilization ratio. So the less of your credit availability you use, the better. Ideally, we like to say stay under 30%. So just putting some numbers to that, if you have a $10,000 credit limit, you'd want to consistently stay below $3,000 of regular credit in use. All right. And here's a quick checklist for establishing good credit. We talked about some of these on the last slide. Make your timely payments each month. Only charge what you can pay off each month. So never carry a balance. I like to say if you can't pay it off in that month, you probably can't afford it. This one's interesting, to keep your credit history intact. So one of the factors is how long have you had credit? So we recommend keeping your oldest credit card open. Avoid retail credit cards, 0% financing offers, anything that seems, a little too good to be true. And lastly here, don't get fooled by paying a minimum payment. we'd encourage you to pay off that whole balance and not carry a balance month over month. So good credit is important. It makes it easier and actually cheaper to do things later, like buy a home, get a car, even qualify for better insurance rates. So take a look at both your credit report and be mindful of your credit score. All right, I want to talk a little bit about student loans here, because understanding the details of your loan early can make a big difference down the road. So a couple tips here on student loans. First and foremost, make sure you know your loan details. Is it a federal loan? Is it a private loan? What's the interest rate? Is it fixed or variable? And most importantly, when do those repayments start? Right? Some kick in right after graduation, others wait 6 months, and some may even start accruing some interest while you're in school. So make sure that you know your loan details front and back. Our next tip here is pay attention. If your loan is accruing interest while you're still in school, that balance can grow faster than you think. And be mindful that late payments can hurt your credit score, like we just talked about, and your credit score sticks with you. If you're still in school, there's a couple smart moves you can make right now. We encourage even just small payments towards your loan. Again, you'll hear us say this over and over, a little bit helps, a little bit helps. So even $25 a month can help reduce how much interest is building up. If you can swing it, covering the interest while you're in school helps you avoid that interest on interest payment later. And then after graduation, make sure you have a plan, make sure you know what your monthly payment is going to be, and make it part of your cash flow. So going back to what Callie was explaining when we first started, your student loan payment should be part of that cash flow calculation. And in my book, repaying debt counts as savings. Automate those payments if you can. And then lastly here, I get this question a lot. Should I pay off the loan early? Make sure your emergency fund is fully funded before paying extra, because you want to avoid the risk of paying down the debt and then having to borrow again from another source if something unexpected comes up.
Thank you, Kate. That was all such helpful information. And next stage that we wanted to go through with you, this is a stage that we call in the thick of it. And this is a stage where we have found that you tend to start having more responsibilities that come up. So that might include a home, you might start having children, you might even have parents that you need to start helping take care of. And in general, this is a time where we see people tend to get quite busy. However, on the plus side, it is also a time that we see oftentimes people are starting to build up a higher income. So at the same time that you have these responsibilities that come up, you also have a little bit higher income where you are able to continue to keep saving despite that. In this phase, we find that the priority really is balance. You want to make sure that you're balancing what you have in terms of your current responsibilities or family support or whatever those responsibilities might be, while making sure that you are still balancing that with savings for retirement. You can really borrow for anything. So, for example, education, buying a home, but the one thing you cannot borrow for is retirement. So I think it can be a little bit tough to put yourself first during this phase, but we highly recommend making sure you are balancing those responsibilities with your savings for the future. And that in mind, we wanted to run through with you in more detail the tools for saving for retirement. And we'll start with the bad news. Things have changed a bit since previous generations. Our lifespans have gotten longer. We are seeing less governmental assistance and fewer company pensions, and people are having children later on in life. What all of that equates to is we need a larger nest egg in retirement to support that retirement. And the last thing that we want our clients to worry about later on in their lives, when they're in their 80s, is whether or not they have enough money to cover those cash flow needs in retirement. However, the good news, as Kate went through in detail, time and compound interest are on your side. We really recommend, again, starting as early as you can, and that way you'll be able to benefit as much as possible from those components. And, in terms of where to save, we got a lot of questions on this, so we wanted to review it with you, the account options. First and foremost, you have your employer-sponsored plans. Typically speaking, this will be a 401k or a 403b. These plans are only offered through employers. And the other option you have is called an individual retirement account or an IRA. These are accounts that you can open up yourself at any custodian, regardless of whether you're employed or not. The IRAs tend to be very helpful if you do not have access to an employer plan, or if you would like to build up additional retirement savings in addition to your employer-sponsored plan. And another thing we wanted to note, so if you do end up changing jobs at any point, you have a few options. You can oftentimes, depends on the plan, keep your funds held at the current custodian. You also have the option to roll over those funds, generally speaking, if you have a new employer-sponsored plan, if you have a new job, with no tax consequences. And then you also have the option to roll to an IRA with no tax consequences. Generally speaking, it depends person by person, but we do recommend considering rolling to an IRA. The nice thing about IRAs is that they have significantly more investment options versus company plans. So generally speaking, that's what makes sense, but again, depends on your specific situation. And in terms of the different types of accounts and types of taxation, there are two different types of accounts. There's the traditional IRA and there's the Roth IRA. And with these vehicles, the primary difference is with the traditional account, anything that you contribute to the account is deductible from your income in that year that you contributed. So you can actually exclude that amount from your income. These accounts will grow tax deferred until you start pulling from them in retirement, and any distributions that are made from the account are going to be taxable to you as ordinary income. The other account type is called the Roth, and these accounts differ in the sense that any contributions that you make are not tax deductible in the year that you contribute. However, the benefit is that the entire account balance is tax-free going forward, as long as that distribution is qualified. So, you have your traditional accounts, they're taxable upon distribution, and then your Roth accounts are not taxable. The other difference that we wanted to note is that with traditional accounts, you are required to start taking annual distributions beginning at your RMD age, and this is between age 73 or 75, depending on the year you were born. Whereas with Roth IRAs, you were actually never required to take any distributions from those accounts while you're alive. In terms of which account type to contribute to, it's basically a matter of if you expect that you're going to be in a lower tax bracket upon your retirement, then it generally is a good option to consider those traditional accounts. If you think that you will be in a similar or even a higher tax bracket later on in your life in retirement, a Roth tends to be a very good option. Usually, Roths make a lot of sense for people who are younger. Earlier on in their career, they tend to be in a much lower tax bracket. Also, those accounts just have even more time to compound tax-free. And Roths can also be useful in a year that, for example, you might have lower income. That would be, again, you'll be in a lower tax bracket that year, so another good time to contribute to a Roth. I personally love using Roths. I like the fact that I know for sure that entire account balance is tax-free, that full balance I can use towards retirement going forward. That is my personal preference. Again, it depends on your specific circumstances. But yeah, that is sort of my takeaway there.
Mine too, Callie. We love a Roth. We love tax-free growth.
love the Roth.
Compounded tax-free growth. All right, I'm going to take us through this section here, pre-retirement. So this, kids are going off to college or leaving the house, your career is starting to peak. So let's take a look at some of the savings options available at this point. All right, so if you're 50 years of age or older, there's a couple powerful savings opportunities available. First, you can contribute an additional $7,500 to your 401k or 403b each year, and an extra $1,000 to your IRA. That's on top of the regular annual limits. And it may not seem like a huge difference at first glance, but over time, it really adds up. So listen to this. If you save just these catch-up amounts over 15 years from age 50 to 65, assuming a 6% annual return, you can end up with more than $200,000 extra saved. And that could be a dedicated healthcare fund. It could be an extra cushion in retirement, the ability to retire a little earlier. Again, that's the power of compound interest. So it's never too late to catch up. And these years can be incredibly impactful. So taking intentional steps in this pre-retirement stage can give you more freedom and peace of mind later.
Totally agree with you there, Kate. And going through into our last stage here, this is going to be the semi-retirement / retirement stage. And this is really a fun time where you can actually start truly enjoying all the fruits of your labor. You'll start pulling from the portfolio in this stage for the liquidity needs once you stop working. You will start to receive Social Security at a certain point. And really, this is a time where you can benefit the most from all of that hard work and all of that planning that you put in for a successful retirement. And, in this phase, if there is a need for some surplus savings in order to make your retirement a success, there's always a solution that we can make. Sometimes that just means working a couple more years or having part-time work, for example, downsizing, another example. So there's really always a solution that we can come up with at any stage to help make sure that you are in a successful place for your retirement. And during this time, it's a really unique stage where there are a lot of planning considerations that we review with clients. So, for example, what is the best strategy for taking your withdrawals? What's the most tax efficient? Should I downsize? When should I start taking Social Security? So a lot of interesting areas that we go through to help make sure that all of our clients, end up creating a plan where they are successful with their retirements. And next, we wanted to go through our fun little cheat sheet. So this shows the first few smart moves that we recommend making. If you do find that you have surplus savings on a monthly basis, it really just shows you where we recommend saving first. First things first, we recommend paying down all of your credit card debt. This is really important because credit cards typically have very high interest rates. And the issue with that is that even if you have a relatively small balance to start, it can easily create a snowball effect where the debt starts compounding upon itself and it can very quickly get out of control. So highly recommend paying credit card debt or a personal loan if you have that. Paying those off first will really help clear the way for you when it comes to helping you start moving towards your other longer term goals. Next, we recommend setting aside an emergency fund. And this is really what's going to come into play if you have something unexpected that comes up, where, you know, a job loss, an illness, something like that that comes up that you unexpectedly need to start pulling assets that are higher than normal. So we recommend setting aside, our rule of thumb is 3 to 6 months worth of your living expenses. And especially now when we are seeing interest rates are higher, you're actually getting reasonably good yields when you invest outside of your checking account. So we don't recommend using a checking account for this. We recommend using an interest-bearing account like high yield savings or a money market or another type of cash alternative where you can actually get some interest on those funds. The next piece is recommending to start building up those retirement savings. First, we recommend making sure that if your employer plan, if you have an employer plan and if you receive any sort of matching contribution from your employer, we absolutely recommend starting with at least the amount that you can receive that maximum employer match. Because basically, if you don't do that, it's like throwing away free money. After that, it's going to be about balancing your shorter term goals with your longer term goals. We want to make sure that you're beginning to, at this point, to start building up some extra savings if you do have a shorter term goal. So for example, that might be a vacation the next year. It might be, you know, an event purchase or ticket or a car purchase, something like that, where you want to make sure you're not cutting into your emergency fund. So balancing these shorter term goals, setting aside savings there, while also saving for some of your longer term goals, like continuing to build up your retirement savings. You know, you might have a goal to purchase a home in the future. So again, after you hit these first 3 categories, it's sort of about balancing your other priorities.
Great. Thanks, Callie. I'm going to take us through, no matter what savings season we're in, it's always important to make sure you and your loved ones are protected. There's a decent bit to cover in this slide, so bear with me. We'll start with your estate plan. If you've built up assets or you have a family, it's definitely time to get this in place. Estate plan isn't just about how your assets get distributed. It's about making sure your wishes are followed, your loved ones know how to care for you and carry out your plans if something happens. We recommend reviewing your estate plan every few years and definitely after major life events like marriage, divorce, birth, or a loss in the family. And I want to highlight 2 parts of estate planning that clients commonly misunderstand. Part of your estate plan includes beneficiary designations. So you may have a 401k or an IRA with beneficiaries listed. You may have a bank account that has, transfer on death instructions. And what many clients don't realize is these designations will override your will or your trust. So it's a good idea to check periodically, make sure everything still aligns with your wishes. Don't be cavalier about these designations, thinking that your will decide the distributions. Secondly, if your documents create a trust, we recommend making sure you're clear on logistically how it works. Do assets need to be retitled into a trust? Do your beneficiary designations change? Your estate attorney and your Beacon Point team can help with this, but the time to get organized with your estate plan is now. All right, next I want to touch a little bit on insurance planning. So if you have dependents, you have debt, or if you just want to provide a safety net, life insurance can be a nice way to protect your loved ones. Typically, low-cost insurance does the job, low-cost term insurance, especially if you want coverage for a specific time frame, like when paying off a mortgage or making sure that it covers until your kids get through school. And then there's long-term care insurance. About 70% of people will need help with daily tasks at some point in their life. Long-term care insurance can help cover some of the cost of care, whether that's you're at home or you're in a facility. Usually the best time to start looking at long-term care is in your 40s or 50s. What we've seen is the longer you wait, the more expensive these policies get, and you may have health issues down the road that may disqualify you from getting coverage. So just think about what your long-term care plan is, and think about long-term care insurance. And then lastly, don't forget about disability insurance. This is important for every working person, but especially valuable if you're younger and your income earning years are still ahead of you. So, I know this isn't the most glamorous part of your financial plan, but it's still one of the most impactful and important. This protection can give you peace of mind and ensure that the plan that you've worked so hard for, that you're building, can still weather life's unexpected turns. Okay. All right, so I'm going to recap a little bit what you've learned in some of your previous sections and put into practice, give you guys some tangible next steps. So first, we talked about goals, right? We talked about your short-term goals, your long-term goals. That's called your time horizon. And the longer your time horizon is, the higher amount of risk you're able to take with your investments. On the flip side of that, if you have a shorter term goal, or think about your emergency fund, for example, you want to make sure that you're very conservative with investing these funds, because you want to make sure that they're available when you need them. So we recommend, as Callie mentioned, cash or a cash alternative for your shorter term goals. We recommend taking a risk tolerance questionnaire. You can talk with your Beacon Point team to help with this decision. All right, and I know we talked about this in some previous sessions. To tie it back together here, it's important to build your portfolio of your savings based on your goals and your time horizon here. These are some of the categories that you learned about in some of your earlier classes: stocks, bonds, alternatives, cash. So we want to bring that up again. Your asset allocation is a really important part of your savings nest egg. And then lastly here, before Callie wraps it up for us, get that account open, right? We talked about investing for compound interest, whether that's your IRA, your 401k, your brokerage account, and then be patient, let the magic of compounding do its thing. Our team is here to help you, so don't hesitate to reach out if you need help opening an account. All right, and with that, I'll pass it back to Callie to send us off with a call of action.
Thank you so much, Kate. We wanted to wrap up here, going through everything we just learned. First and foremost, as I went through at the beginning, understanding those personal financial coordinates. So knowing your cash flow and your net worth, that is going to be a fantastic way to start. Really going to arm you with knowledge and let you know if there's any adjustments that you might want to start making. Next, writing down those goals, as Kate went through, that's huge. It's really the best first step towards actually accomplishing them. Next, in terms of savings, paying down that credit card debt first and foremost, then establishing your emergency reserve with the 3 to 6 months worth of expenses that we talked about, making sure all of your protection needs are reviewed, as Kate went through. And then for a savings outside of that, you're going to want to make sure first that you understand all the accounts that you have. You assess whether or not that you would like to open up a new account to boost up your savings. And then when it comes to actually allocating those investments, as Kate just reviewed, we really recommend taking a risk tolerance questionnaire. That will show you your individual tolerance for taking on risk, as well as your time horizon. And, the longer, as Kate mentioned, the time horizon, the more aggressive you can go. And then in terms of actually building up those savings over time, as Kate reviewed, setting up automatic monthly savings is really one of the best recommendations that we can offer, especially the younger you are. It removes it out of your account before you even really see it and automatically starts building that up. And otherwise, working with an advisor, as Kate mentioned, our team is here, happy to help you. If you have any questions on your financial plan, or if you'd like to talk about building a portfolio with us at Beacon Point, we are happy to help.
Thanks, Kate and Callie. Before we sign off, don't forget to stay in touch with us. Just open your phone's camera and scan the QR code. You'll find our latest blog and article content, social media pages, and the Your Dollars Our Cents podcast, hosted by 2 of our Beacon Point Wealth Advisors. That's a wrap on today's Personal Finance 101 class in our Foundations of Finance course. Thanks again for joining us. We hope you're walking away with practical tips to build a strong financial future.